In 1993, I was 14 years old. I heard there was a gathering that was going to happen in Las Vegas. Hackers were actually going to get together and show each other their faces, which seemed super foreign to me, but also exciting. Now, I was poor and I lived thousands of miles away, so I didn't get to attend. And unfortunately, circumstances meant I didn't get to attend until 2000, right? So DEF CON 8 was my first DEF CON, and at that DEF CON, I made sure to introduce myself to the guy who was running it, the Dark Tangent, right? And so that introduction, that simple handshake changed my life, right? If it wasn't for the Dark Tangent, also known as, I like when we do that, also known as your legal name, so AKA Jeff Moss, I would not have the career that I have today. I would not be able to put food on the table the same way that I do. We have traveled the world together. We have gotten up to no good in so many different countries in so many different ways. He is the founder of Black Hat. He is the founder of DEF CON. He consults countries, world governments, but he's also just my friend, Jeff Moss.
Right in. Love you, buddy.
When Jeff and I were discussing, what's the keynote going to be like, and so he said, I don't want to do slides. SAINTCON is this community type of thing. Let's just have a chat. And so that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to have a chat. I'm going to ask him some questions, and then hopefully toward the end we'll have some time. We've got microphones out, and you can ask him questions too. Yay! But yeah, let's just get right into it. So I mentioned in the introduction, you founded, the largest hacker convention in the world, giving many of us for the first time a place that we called home. But how did you start? How did you get?
Yeah, that's what it turned into, right? But that wasn't the master plan. It started when I started. So I was a miscreant hacker, like all of us, right? And back in the day, there were only a couple conferences you could go to, and they're all invite only. The whole hacking scene was, underground, invite only. And I couldn't get a fucking invitation. And so I was like, fuck this. So I ended up finagling. I ended up going to, so here's the deal. In the wintertime, you could go to HoHoCon. You could go to PumpCon in Halloween. In the summertime, you could go to SummerCon. Right? Those are the three cons, all invite only. And then later on, another one started. Well, anyway, I ended up deciding that, there's a long story. I ended up throwing a party for a network that disappeared. Like, I was this giant hub for all this messaging of all these different hacking networks in the United States. One of the networks was going away out of Canada, Platinum Net. And he's like, all my users are in America. You're my American hub. So let's do a going away party. And I said, well, yeah, okay, we should do it in Vegas because it's cheap and it's central. And then he disappeared, and he was never to be found again. His dad got a new job. They moved too soon. So I was left with this half-started party. And I'm like, well, if it's up to me, I'm going to invite everybody on Pound Hack and Pound Freak and IRC, and Alt on Usenet. And I just invited everybody, and it just kept growing and growing. And in the movie War Games, Vegas, I'm from Seattle, so the character in War Games is from Seattle, and he nukes Las Vegas. I was like, this is all going to work out. I had never been to Vegas in my life, so if it blew up, I would have at least gotten to Vegas. I'd sit by the pool, had a pina colada, and then it just grew. And there was no way to understand who was going to show up. But it turned out a lot of people from LA in the Bay Area drove over, and we had about 100 people that first year. And my thinking is being a hacker dude online, there was so much bullshit. Like, this inordinate amount of nonsense was out there. And it drove me crazy because me and my hacker buddies were trying to be very logical and thinking about it. Even though we didn't have access to all the technical manuals for the phone system, people would say, like, no kidding, this is what they would say. On your bulletin board, if you put on the home page a disclaimer that says, no police allowed, and they log in and they create an account, that's entrapment. You can't do that. And I'm like, I don't think that's how it works. Now, I'm not a lawyer and I'm like 13, 14 years old, but that just doesn't sound right. They're like, no. If you want to place a phone call and not have it traced because you're doing it fraudulently, type in this number, boop, 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 and that disables call tracing. If you hear this tone, 3 beeps or whatever, you're good. The next number you call, untraceable. Like, I don't know if that's really how it works. No, it's a telco test number. It disables. Okay. And so that DEF CON, I wanted to hear from the experts because I'd heard enough from nonsense, right? So we had like Dan Farmer, who ended up talking about the importance of, he was at Sun Microsystems. He was the guy everybody wanted to be. He was like the chief security officer before they had that term. And he was managing all these Sun Microsystems. And he's like, there's too many of them now. I need to create scripts. I need some way of managing my network and I need to see what's available. And he talked about the need for that. And then he wrote Satan, and that got him on the cover of Time magazine. And that was the beginning of network automation scanning tools, right? And we had a prosecutor that did the first giant prosecution, Operation Sun Devil, out of Arizona. Gail Thackeray shows up. Very awkward because she's talking to our audience and there's somebody she's prosecuting, like right in the front row, but she's like, well, it's a different state.
And probably someone she was going to prosecute in the future. So.
Man, we trashed the AT&T local telco garbage dumpsters, and we come back with all these bags of telco documents. We dump them in the floor like returning victorious warriors right in front of her. And she's like, where'd you find those? I'm like, well, we got them out of the dumpster. And she's like, well, was the dumpster inside the fence or outside the fence? Like, well, outside the fence. She's like, enjoy, She's like, and it kind of turned out that was the magical formula, I think, was inviting everybody and trying to have the experts talk to the not experts. And people were just really hungry for that. And I don't think we understood, because the invite only ones were much more like hackers talking to hackers. Yeah. And not really getting so much of the outsiders.
I like that because at my first DEF CON, like I said, DEF CON 8, a group of us from Hectic, if any of you remember Hectic from back in the day, and the ZZQ guys, we went to the Department of Workforce Services dumpsters and got a bunch of stuff out. I brought it back to DEF CON, dumped it on the floor. Yes. And there was like people's social security numbers in it. And so we called them. We said, is this so-and-so? Social security number, blah, 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 blah. And they were like, what in the what? And we're like, hey, you might want to talk to Department of Workforce Services about how they throw away their trash.
Yeah, have them
and we just
shred
kept calling
stuff.
people. It was good times. But so speaking of things that are, what's a story that you can tell us about something illegal that you were involved in that the statute of limitations is up on?
I was when I was young, I was quite the pirate. So there's this magical time where like this one Christmas or whatever, I remember everybody on the block or in the neighborhood, it was a pretty well-off neighborhood, and everybody got a different computer. The color computer, TRS-80, Model 3, whatever, TI 99, whatever, 4A, the 800, the 400, the this or that. I got an IBM PC-2. So it was the 640K model. That turned out to be the winning computer, but it was random kind of that I ended up with that. Anyway, all the kids in all the blocks, we all got like one game. So everybody's trying to copy their games and share the games and go over everybody's house. And then it was like Copy 2 PC and Cascade Crack and all these tools because none of us could afford a $99 game. But so we each get our parents to buy one game and then we try to copy it and share. Yeah, that was awesome. And also you have to remember in those early days, piracy wasn't illegal. There's nothing wrong with that. Kind of like how AI companies now can steal everything on the internet and it's not illegal. It's all come full circle, right? So back then it wasn't illegal if you didn't charge for it. So you couldn't make money off of other people's work was the rule. So all these people were trading wares. And until this one guy had a multi-line bulletin board, got greedy, had all this commercial software database programs, and he was charging access. And that was enough for law enforcement to come in. I think it was one of the database companies, and the law changed. And that's when piracy, don't copy that floppy, really kind of took off. Anyway, so I would say like it was basically in the early days piracy, and then it was just the desire to connect with people. So it was all long distance phone calls. You were freaking, you were trying to figure out how to make those connections. The biggest network was the telco network. That's what you were trying to explore and understand. There are no manuals, there's no Google. So it was really all about meeting friends or trying to make friends without telling them your true identity. There's a book, if none of you have read it, there's a short story and they turned it into a book. It's called, I think it's called True Identity. Is it called True Identities? Werner Vinge and True Names. That's it, True Names. Yeah, that captured some of it pretty well. That was a fun read. So as time went on, I was lucky enough that the shit I did, scanning networks, backdoors, whatever, none of that stuff was illegal back then. Now it's illegal. Now, the stuff we used to do as kids, there's like federal sentencing minimum guidelines. Like it can destroy your life. But we were lucky to come up in a time where we had like this unfettered exploratory freedom because there was nothing at risk. There was no bank online. There's no medical records to wreck, right? There's nothing to ransom. So it's kind of like no harm, no foul. But nowadays, the world we live in, there's unlimited risk and there's unlimited harm that can be caused, right? And so the rules have had to change. And part of the big challenge is how do you still create a sense of curiosity and freedom when like some kid downloads Loic and wants to strike a blow against the Syrian government or whatever, scans the wrong thing, and now he's a felon.
Yeah.
That's, you know.
Okay. So piracy, phone freaking, traditional methods. Now, you're saying most of that stuff wasn't really illegal at the time. So we'll say, okay, fine, you didn't do it, Jeff, but I'm sure you've heard of things that were illegal that took place. What's an interesting thing from the past that you heard about?
There's so many crazy stories. The thing that gets me about hacking, it's almost like the movies where the people that had like the biggest like risk-taking appetite tended to have like the best returns. And so back in the early days, before everything was well known, right, it was like Kevin Poulsen, Kevin Mitnick, Susan Thunder, the LA4, and they basically just did whatever they kind of wanted to do, and they were pretty good and they got away with a lot of it. And so some of the stories are public, but like Kevin Mitnick one time, he was like, I wonder if the phone company's onto me. How would I find that out? I should probably go root through the filing cabinet drawers of the telco security office. That sounds like a good idea. So he gets drunk, goes into the telco office, impersonating somebody with like a uniform or whatever, goes there and he freaking roots through the filing cabinets to figure out what they've got on him. Maybe the FBI's onto me. Maybe I should tap the FBI. Because you have telco access, you can tap lines, right? And so if you read the stories of those early days, the people that had like mastery of the infrastructure, here's one. There was this guy, and I got really drunk with him once at DEF CON. So drunk. It was the first year at DEF CON. I got so drunk, I didn't get up the next day, right? And when I finally got functional around 1 or 2 in the afternoon, the con was still working. This is at the Lexus Park. And this is when I realized I wasn't essential to the running of the con. The rest of the people got it. They could cover for me. We could cover for each other. And it was like a functioning organism.
You're like, I'm doing this tomorrow.
This is awesome. So there's this guy, Parmaster. If anybody heard of Parmaster, raise your hand. Anybody? A couple people know Parmaster. So this is like old school shit. Parmaster, before the internet, there was X25 network. And there were 2 competing X25 operators. There's like TimeNet, and I think, who was the other one? It was another telco that went away, GTE. I think it was GTE, TimeNet, and MCI. Yes. And they each had their own supervisory system. Think of it like it's a BMC backend network for their entire network. And one of them was called TDD2, and the other one was called X-Ray. Anyway, PAR had X-Ray access. He could control and monitor that entire X25 network. So what could you do with that back then? All the ATM machines were on X25. So he's watching all the ATM machines on the East Coast. And with X25 back then, circuit switched, he could, and it was all unencrypted, he could change account numbers in real time. So as they came through a pad, he could change where all the money went in real time, right? And he didn't do anything with it because he wasn't a criminal. But he was like, and so his nickname was, it was always, he had his X-ray login, his password was Parmaster is God. And so whenever you see Parmaster, like, Parmaster is God, and he's like, yes, you know, and that was like the crowning achievement. Like back in the day, that guy was like, you know, a crazy hero. And you have these stories of like MOD versus LOD, and they're fighting across AT&T infrastructure and thumper.belcore.com and all this stuff. And then years later, you turn it out that there's this other hacker, Grok. Grok also is God. Grok is on the AT&T systems that LOD and MOD are fighting over. And they don't know Grok is below them, keeping the system stable. So he's watching them, taking their exploits, seeing what the young whippersnappers are up to, right? They think they're the masters of this AT&T network. No, there's another guy down below. And that was like, how the fuck do you timeshare between like adversaries? Well, years later, I'm giving some testimony to some oversight committee for the Bureau of Veterans Affairs in DC. And it comes out, there's 5 nation states in the Veterans Affairs system, right? They're still probably there. It's probably 6 now. And our question is like, how do they timeshare? Like China gets it on Monday and Russia gets it on Tuesday. And like this problem that hackers were having like 30 years ago, it's still a problem today, but now it's nation states doing it instead of hackers, but it's all the same thing. So it's just, yeah, it's crazy, man.
Wow, it's a good lesson though. There's always a bigger fish, right?
There's always, yeah.
I try to tell people that all the time. It's like whenever you go into a room with a group, don't assume that you're the smartest person in the room or the most skilled person in the room. Like try to go in with humility because in the background is Grok.
Grok is just
Grok is just hanging out going, okay, kid. So when you started DEF CON and eventually Black Hat, you'd always invited government, law enforcement, and hackers to share that space. Like, what are some of the lessons that you've learned when trying to bridge that gap between hackers and policymakers?
Yeah, it's maybe we might talk about this a little bit later, but I'd like to say it was one of my brilliant mistakes, or I knew the feds were going to come to DEF CON, and so why pretend they're not? So I faxed the Secret Service office in Las Vegas and invited them to come. And I didn't get a response. And it's getting closer to the show, and I faxed them again. No response. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to call them up. And I'm like, hey, my name's Jeff Moss. We're doing this hacking conference, you know. And the guy answers phone, oh, you want to talk to Special Agent in Charge Jones or whatever. So they transfer me to Jones. I've got this whole spiel ready. We're doing this thing. We really want to have you. Interesting security, conversations, blah, blah, blah. And there's this, I'm like waiting for him to respond, and there's this big pregnant pause on the line. He's like, we are aware of your activities. And I'm like, oh, so you're coming? And he's like, no, we're operational. You want the policy people in DC. Don't, you know, whatever. It's not for us. But, you know, thanks for letting us know. And, you know, good luck. I go, okay, right on. DEF CON 1 is over. Guy walks up to me and he's like, shows me his badge. And he's like,
how was his badge, everybody?
Yeah, this is my badge. It wasn't his.
Just for.
It wasn't the Schwartz.
What?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Whoa. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, yeah, Secret Service. They're just, you know, like, you guys said you weren't going to be here. And he's like, oh, well, you know.
We lie.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, we're starting a game. Spot the Fed, right? And so it became this sort of friendly cat and mouse. And so I think the lesson learned there is you treat each other with respect, but you can still have fun with it. And you don't have to compromise what you want to do with the conference, but you have to be aware, of course, feds are going to be there, but not just the feds from other countries, organized crime, like everybody will be there, and you don't know who everybody is. So you just have to behave as if everybody's there. I mean, we've had Chinese intelligence, we've had French intelligence. I mean, we've had everybody. And it sucks too, because when you make some friends in the FBI or whatever, and you're like, hey, you're going to be there. And they're like, yeah, we're going to be working. It's like, sucks to be you. You know, we're going to be having fun. He's like, well, we got to chase down this criminal and that criminal. And so I would say it's that building that mutual respect. And it turns out, of course, feds, like they started outing themselves. They're like, I want the shirt, so I'm going to out my buddy over there. And it was like, what? Or they'd be like, can you find somebody to out him? Because I want to get that guy from that other agency. I want them to look bad. And it's like, so when it became competitive fed on fed, we had to change the rules. Yeah.
Nice. It's not, they got an I am the Fed shirt. So.
Yeah. So that was, yeah.
They got something. They had to walk away with it. I do. There was, I'll share a quick story. I know this is about Jeff, but when bringing in other agencies and stuff like that, it can get pretty interesting. At an early ShmooCon, Keith Myers and I went to a party that was just up in somebody's suite. And it turned out what we discovered from meeting these people is they turned out to be a bunch of NSA folks. And so we were like, we're at a Fed party. Like, like, what are we going to do with this? And so our buddy Salter hands out candy phalluses to people, little bags of. We took them and crushed them up so it looked like a fine powder, and we snorted them off a table in front of a bunch of people who were federal agents, right? And they were like, like they're all thinking about their clearances. That room empty. I mean, we emptied the room, and we were like, that was really fun. That was super fun. It was just candy. But
where else can you do that? How else could you?
It was amazing. I'm telling you, empty room. Like it was fantastic. And just Keith and I stand there going, that was better than we thought it was going to be. So. All right. So all the questions aren't going to be softball. I'm going to ask you a couple that you're not going to like. And so this one is like when I first went to DEF CON in 2000, it cost me $50 to go. And this year it was nearly $500 to go to DEF CON. Now that's an Xbox, right? So you created a conference that was initially entirely populated with and run by teenagers, right? But has the cost of DEF CON become so much that the audience it was originally intended for can no longer afford?
Yeah, I mean, like that's something I worry about all the time, is about how much things have changed.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned earlier, like you couldn't get in trouble, now you can go to jail, right? Everything's more expensive. And in the early days, it was really you and your buddies trying to get together, putting a face to the name. And what I realized is, so in the early days when we started Black Hat, I think the first Black Hat was $995 or something, right? That was a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Now it's like what, $3,000, $2,500? People are paying $2,500 or $3,000 to go to a conference. We're $500. Okay, we're a fraction of that, but it still seems expensive. And I worry that all the pressures are going to price out the next generation. But I guess I'll mention it now, but like the decision I made to sort of create DEF CON to be not invite only, because I was not invited. The first DEF CON, we recorded all that talks on audio tape, and I would sit there and had this little high-speed cassette tape duplicator, and I'd dupe these tapes, and I think there's like 15 tapes, and I'd sell these tapes for $20 in the mail, a whole freaking brick of tapes. to people who wanted to hear the talks. And the moment Real Audio had a video, audio codec I could download or stream, I encoded those things, stopped selling cassette tapes, and I just gave away the speeches for free because I was too lazy. I was not going to sit there and do tapes forever. So all the DEF CON content we always released for free. So when I started Black Hat, all the Black Hat content got released for free. Now the norm in the security community is you release your talks for free. And so I think one of the countervailing things for the price is that if you can't come, don't come. But we're still going to release all the content. We still want to allow you to remotely participate. And maybe one day you'll have a job or whatever and you can afford to come. But I can't control the cost of unions or labor, and so I'm in a sticky situation of like, well, I can do less. If we do less with the conference, we charge less because it's less expensive to put on. But how much less? And that's where the trap is. Like, which villages do I cut? They're awesome. How many contests do we cut? How many less speakers do we have? And so instead, I've been really trying to focus on controlling costs and doing the same things that are not visible to the attendees, but do it for cheaper. Because I don't want the attendee experience to ever suffer, but maybe there's stuff in the background we can do to become more efficient. So yeah, it sucks. But I don't know of a good alternative. And I look around the world and see what other people are charging, and it's like, well, I think it's probably pretty reasonable. And then when we started DEF CON, there was no careers in this. You couldn't get a job. It was pure passion. Now you go to a B-Sides, and I'm not calling out B-Sides, I'm just using them as an example. But the first page is like 59 sponsors, right? The whole slide is nothing but 1 million logos. But we started before there was even a logo to be had, right? A company to be had. And so there's this weird community expectation that DEF CON can never have sponsors because we never had sponsors. So therefore we never will have sponsors. So we're trapped in this weird situation where, like, if I get a sponsor and put it up on a DEF CON thing, we're a sellout, but everybody else can do it. And so, we're it's kind of weird legacy problem of being first is the expectations are you'll always kind of be the same. And so then we try to get around that by getting sponsors for villages, sponsors for contests, get the sponsors' money directly into the hands of the people organizing the other stuff. But I really don't want to ever have to get into a phone conversation with a sponsor who's telling me I should cancel a talk. Like, I don't want that. And so then what's happened is like maybe 10 years ago, we really started to realize there's InfoSec and there's hacking conferences. And a lot of things were moving into InfoSec because that's where you could get a job. That's where you could get career. That's where you could find all these sponsors. And we just doubled down on being hacker. And so if you ever submit a talk to DEF CON or anything to DEF CON, one of the first questions we ask ourselves, is this hacker? Like, is this a blog post? Okay, we don't want it. Is this a career advancement thing? We don't want it. Is this how to use a $250,000 database tool that nobody in the audience can afford to have? But if you work at Amazon, you do have? Okay, that's an InfoSec talk, right? That's for people who have professional careers with access to these tools. We don't want that at DEF CON. And I think trying to create that distinction between hacker and InfoSec is like really where we're putting our energy.
Trying to stay hacker, keep it in some
it's
kind of reasonable
freaking hard, man.
Yeah.
It's like, what is hacker? And so you have to start trying to...
What is it, Jeff?
You have to enumerate it, man. I think it's like the joy of discovery, I think, is really big. Unexpected outcomes, like speaking truth to power. I think it's the freedom to fail. Like in InfoSec, really, who really feels the freedom to fail at their company 3 times in a row, right? That's could be career limiting. But at DEF CON or whatever, or in hacker spaces, like we celebrate failure, right? That's part of the learning experience, right? And it really became, I had a friend who was he was the first chief security officer for Facebook and employee number 40 at Facebook. Anyway, he goes on, he starts a company, he's sending a bunch of people to Vegas. And I asked him, like, hey man, do you send anybody to Black Hat? He's like, no, not this year. But I'm sending a bunch of people to DEF CON. I'm like, why would you, what's that all about? said, well, my team's really good. They have a lot of great skills. Like I sent them to black hat training. It's like sharpening the edge of the knife, like a little bit sharper. The knife's pretty sharp. Like they don't need that. I sent them to DEF CON to learn how to think. I had not considered that, right? And ever since that conversation, it's really like, I think hacker is a mindset and it's the way you think and approach the problems. And InfoSec is like more centered around pure tasks. They're both valuable. You need both. But I'm not trying to be both.
Cool. So speaking of DEF CON evolving, so taking DEF CON into countries like China and Bahrain makes some people, get up in arms. But why do you think it's important that DEF CON does expand into countries like that?
I think America, we don't have a lock on technology or hacking. There's a fantastic hacking conferences in Europe. And I don't want to bring DEF CON and compete with buddies in Germany or Amsterdam or wherever. So if I was going to try to grow somewhere, where would we try something? Where is there a large population of people that are really interested? In China at that time, man, it was, I don't know, did anybody go to DEF CON China? I mean, like 2 people. It was magical because at that time, they were in the equivalent of like what our .com bubble was. Yeah. So remember when like hackers were in everything, they're in every TV show. They were in that moment. It happened 15 years later for them than it did for us. And my thinking was that internet problems are global problems, and you're not going to solve global problems from one position. So you're going to have to know people in China if you're going to solve any global problem, because the tech's probably going to be manufactured in China, and the tech stack or the cloud is probably going to be in America. And yes, we have good relationships with Europe, but how many people have any kind of hacker buddies in China, right? It's pretty rare. Yet every year, hundreds of Chinese hackers would come to DEF CON and just kick ass in CTF and fantastic talks. And so you knew they were hungry, that you knew they were getting out, they were trying to meet people internationally. So I figured we'd go in there, make some connections, and if something goes wrong, I can pick up the phone and I can call somebody. And for years it worked. Like you would read something in the West about Chinese whatever, and you're like, that doesn't make sense to me. You'd call somebody back in China or message them and you're like, no, that story's 180 degrees wrong. Like this is what's really going on. And so you had this access to information kind of like in the early days of hacking. Like the public thought it worked this way, but you knew it really worked a different way. Same thing would happen in China. You'd hear this story. Like, do you know why the Chinese companies are so good at hacking? Why they have such fantastic offensive capabilities? Does anybody know? It's not really a story that's ever been told in the West that I know. But years ago, Alibaba and so there's Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu, and they're the BATs, and Qihoo, which Qihoo 360, they have a lot of MSS contracts. They do the part of the Great Firewall of China, some of the offensive hacking against America, whatever, but it's a big security consulting company for the government, kind of like a Booz Allen. They break in and steal some secrets from, I think it was Alibaba. No, I'm sorry, maybe Tencent. And they're stealing all the shit out of Tencent. And Tencent like, what's going on? What the fuck? So they go to the government, like we would go to the FBI or the police, and they're like, hey, they're stealing all of our stuff. Like, what's going on? And the law enforcement says, you're a big boy. Can't you take care of yourself? And they're like, oh, it's on. And they take all the money and they hire all the security people in Beijing that they can hire. I'm not shitting you. People were getting paid $15,000 a week, right? They hired everybody. And they're like, okay, this is how it's going to go. We get all the skill. And they fucking battle back to Qihoo. And Alibaba's like, what's going on? Weaponize, weaponize, weaponize. And they hire everybody. And so now, and it goes on for like 6 or 9 months, and it's crazy, and it's back and forth, and everybody's pointing guns at each other, and there's flare-ups, and it's destroying the community. Who do you work for? You're attacking me. And it just becomes super toxic, and finally the government steps in and says, stop. So they stop. But they need to maintain these offensive teams, because who knows, it might happen again. So now the marketing department's like, okay, well, we got these awesome badasses. Let's do something with them. Let's send them to international hacking competitions like Pwn to Own. So they send them to Pwn to Own, and they just destroy the West, right? These guys had like 38 employees, one group out of 10, one 30-person group, so about 300 people just at one company doing this stuff. And they would spend the whole year to come up with an exploit chain to win Pwn to Own. And then the company would say, see, look, China citizens, we take your data seriously. We are winning international competitions. We are super cool and highly sophisticated, and we best everybody. This is how important protecting you is to us, right? And this goes on, and that's how they develop this offensive skill. Well, then, I'm sorry if I'm taking up a little time, but I love telling stories, and you need to understand, like, the world is different over there. Qihu splits. The founders split. They get in an argument. There's an enterprise division now and the government consulting division. There's an argument between them. And I'm not kidding you. Employees, male employees, get a phone call, and it's, come to work on Monday and be ready to fight.
Like Anchorman style.
Like I'm not kidding.
The guy.
They're going to meet in the parking lot at Qihu, and they're going to fight. And they're going to resolve their situation. I'm like, what? And if somebody narked it out to the police, right? And the police are like, absolutely, you're not showing up in the park. But like, they're reverting to these. And so you get these insights that never get told in the West. We would never have any of these stories, right? We hadn't been building. Then COVID comes along, destroys, like they laid off a third, BATs, they laid off a third of their employees. They had about 180 or $90 billion in a research and development bucket, and Common Prosperity Chairman Xi comes along and takes almost 100 billion to redistribute it. So overnight, the BAT's research funds went from 180 billion to 80, and they don't know if the government's going to come knocking the next day and take another 50. So they're not spending money. They're holding on every dollar like it's their last dollar. It was chaos. And so if we wanted to go back to China, politics aside, it's just a completely different universe there now. So that was like a moment in time and Bahrain, the Fifth Fleet is parked there. It's a completely kind of different situation, but same thing. They're younger and they're hungry. And it just feels like, there's a moment there, maybe it'll pass, but I want to explore it.
Yeah. I think, those relationships that we made at DEF CON China were great, and we were fully prepared to go again before COVID hit. And actually,
you had your room searched, right?
Yeah, of course.
Everybody had their room searched. We got so...
Ooh, they're good, because I had put stuff out in different areas, and there was I'd taken pictures of things like where the zipper was on my suitcase on things. Oh, yeah. But there was one thing on the hotel safe that I was like, oh, they missed that. They missed, and I was like, so they've been in here.
So we would lay out the way. So if you're going to a country and you're going to get yourself searched, just make it easy for them. And this is how you do it. You unzip all of your luggage and you lay it up against the wall in a big line. So it's very easy for them to sort through all of your stuff. Because if they don't, all my wife's stuff ended up in the duffel bag, and the duffel bag ended up in the suitcase. We couldn't find any of because they're just burning through it. And they don't really care.
No, it was interesting. Same thing when I was in Moscow. I was like, oh, they've been in here. That's hi guys. But that was because of those relationships made at DEF CON China. I went to Shanghai one time, and I met up with somebody that I had met at DEF CON China, and we went and hung out, went out to the Formula One circuit and stuff. And then he's like, hey, do you want to go to where there's a building, that's where the government hacks the US. You want to go see that building? I was like, no, I don't. No. What? I'm not going within a mile of that freaking
I had a friend who he went to he was in the Biden administration, he just elected, and he's like, I'm going to go to Moscow. I've never been. Before I get sucked into government, I want to go. And the White House security people are like, are you crazy? He's like, no, I want to go. Okay, just don't bring any electronics or whatever. And he tells this crazy story where he goes into a bar. His family's out, a restaurant. He goes into the bar, and there's a Russian guy that kind of comes in, and he pulls out a stack of like $100 bills. And he's like, you're American, right? And he's like, yeah, I need your help. My friend paid me in these American dollars, but I don't know if they're counterfeit. Can you check them for me? And he's like, hands in his pocket. I don't know what you're talking about. Got to go buy, And it's like they constantly were trying to get you to touch something or hold something where they get a picture of you. Yeah. It was crazy.
Now it did, and then not even on the hacking side though, when COVID stuff started to kick off, I think it was like November before lockdown. Like, so this is very early. I was talking to one of the guys that I'd met at DEF CON China, and he's like, oh, like people are getting sick here. There's like this virus. And like, I wonder if you guys will still be able to come. They're being like super weird about it. And they're like locking down cities. And I'm like, what? Like, oh, that's weird. Oh, we're still coming, right? Like we had flights booked. Like hotels were ready. We were going in March of 2020 to go out to do DEF CON China again. We did not go. Something came up, so we had to cancel. But yeah, it was.
You got another question for me? I know.
Oh my gosh, I have 33 questions. We don't have time to do that, but I did write down a bunch of stuff. But all right. So speaking of nations, right? When we were growing up, we were constantly talking about how we all thought we were fighting Big Brother, right? We're fighting Big Brother. So how's the fight going?
Not good.
Okay. All right, next question.
Not good. I think there was like this critical misunderstanding that the enemy essentially was the corporations, right? And so like the cypherpunks were so awesome and so PGP and all these going after the man. And it turned out it wasn't the man, it was Facebook, it was Google, it was, it was everybody else, right? And by the time they realized that, all their thinking and all their solutions and all their strategies did not necessarily apply to people voluntarily turning over all their information, right? And so now we're in the worst of both worlds. We've got the mega companies and we've got all the nation states, and not just America Big Brother, right? We're talking the world Big Brother. I heard a statistic the other day. I'm sure it's off by a little bit. 70% of all voice and text communication is transcribed and indexed. 70% of the world's voice conversations. I mean, darn. And that's, I'm sure people are doing all kinds of analytics on it, but it just seems like there are a lot of opportunities to make privacy baked in, and we've missed basically every opportunity. Like the SS7 stuff came out, like these companies that are selling your geolocation of where you've been, where you can go historically. That SS7 vulnerability has intentionally been left in the SS7 system for decades. It's not new. It's not unknown. Certain law enforcement agencies kept that in because it was very advantageous to them. But it's not advantageous to everybody else, right? And so now we have this problem where I can be tracked around the world because of these legacy problems that nobody wanted to deal with. So I think how do you regain agency, or how do you regain control, or can you, in this environment? And I think as hackers, we have to sort of think of solutions, or at least consider them. And it's turned out to be really a lot harder than that. So it's been 30 years. Why can't we send secure email? We have ChatGPT, we have billions of GPUs, but you can't send secure email, right? And that's the crux of the problem. I think creating secure email by default doesn't make anybody a billionaire. So no VC will invest in it. But building that system probably takes 5 or 10 people. You got to maintain it. If it's S-MIME tools or PGP, whatever it is, like there's this critical gap. It's a little too big for 1 or 2 people. It doesn't make anybody $100 million. So that doesn't get done. Like that level of work. And it turns out a lot of the privacy and security problems are in that low level, low profitability, high security returns, but very little money. And so that none of that gets funded. And I'm not 100% sure how you get around that. When I was the CSO at ICANN, like you used to have Dane, and Dane would allow you to not trust a certificate authority. And I could publish my TLS cert fingerprint in DNS. Your browser, Firefox or Chrome back then, would look up defcon.org. It would get my fingerprint. I would hand out a self-signed certificate, not something from a CA, and they'd match it against the fingerprint and be like, yeah, this is DEFCON site. And I controlled my destiny. I owned defcon.org. I controlled the certificate. I was in charge of my future. And then the story comes out that those queries take some milliseconds and take some time, and Chrome performance engineers get bonuses on how they speed things up. So they cut Dane out of the browser because you don't want to spend time doing lookups. So now you can get to the site a couple milliseconds faster, but now I'm not in charge of my destiny anymore. I'm reliant on certificate authorities, right? Yeah, super frustrating.
Yeah, it is interesting how much we'll just give away for convenience, you know. Like, I mean, or we just don't know what things are doing what. Like you mentioned, location data and stuff, and then, you know, I see Bart here and Pope over there. When we're in the Black Hat NOC and we're looking at the traffic, we see applications on phones that are just shouting out, you know, latitude and longitude information in the clear, like the communication from the application itself to whatever the backend server, you know, might be secure, but for whatever reason, I see Nibble nodding over there because he's also one of our NOC guys, and like, for whatever reason, they're like, where are you right now? Let me tell the world at least once a minute, you know, and then we can track people as they move around the conference based on that location data from, in some cases, your VPN, which is great. All right. What's a decision in your career that looked crazy at the time, but actually aged perfectly?
I got 100% lucky once. I was at Black Hat, and I got Black Hat got a call from, I want to say it was the White House, and but it's like, hey Jeff, some federal person's calling, and I'm like, what? They probably want ticket discounts to Black Hat, right? It's like, fuck. Okay, fine, transfer them over to me, you know. And it turns out it's this guy, Jake. And he's like, hey, you want to be on some advisory committee for Department of Homeland Security? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, you know, we review some documents. We'll send you some documents. You review them over. You just provide feedback, send them back to us. I'm like, well, how much time does that take? It's like, no, it's, you know, a couple times a year, 4 times a year or whatever. I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah, I can do that. Sure. Great. Okay, thanks. Bye. And then like 3 weeks later, like, security paperwork arrives, right? And all this crazy, and I'm like, who was this guy again from 3 weeks ago? And I find him, I'm like, what the fuck's going on? Like, what is this? This is not like you asking me some random questions. And that's how I joined this, became an advisor for the Secretary of Homeland Security. And it was completely like a random, like a detour in my life that I'd never contemplated, never considered. I said yes. And that turned out to unlock a whole other galaxy of experiences. And years later, I asked Jake how, so the way these things work is your names get put in hats. Like, let's say I'd recommend somebody for an advisory committee. I don't tell, like, I want to put you in for something. I don't tell you I'm putting you in for something. I just put you in for something. You're not allowed to know. And then you get vetted, maybe it gets boiled down to 10 or whatever, and then they all get vetted, and then they have like 5 or 6 people that are vetted, and then they'll contact you maybe and ask you, right? And so you'll be sitting there like, who the hell put me in for that? Where did that come from? Who even thought of me? So I asked Jake that, and I'm not shitting you. The secretary, Janet Napolitano at the time, she's like, all my advisors are like old white dudes over like in their 60s and 70s. I need more diversity. I need some younger people.
That was you?
And they need, I'm a white dude. but I wasn't in my 60s, and they had nobody with computers or information security or anything, right? She had all the people to talk about nuclear war or the New York's police department or whatever. And so I went online and I searched for hacker, and there was a picture of you standing in front of the Black Hat logo, and it looked pretty awesome. So I put your name in. I'm like, okay, awesome, I guess. Which is kind of funny because the way that No Before, right, became so big, they partnered with Kevin Mitnick. The guy put in the word hacker. Kevin was the first answer, called Kevin, and that's how.
So this is.
I'm telling you, search ranking. Search ranking, yeah. There's something to it. But that unlocked a whole nother thing. And so I think I was smart enough to not screw up that opportunity.
So similar type of question, other side of it though, after 3 decades doing DEF CON, Black Hat, all that, what's something that you wish you would have done differently?
I don't know if it'd be done differently, but I wish I would have learned sooner that you can't please all the people all the time. You know, because it still really bothers me when people don't have a good experience or we make a mistake or something. But you're never going to please everybody all the time, so you do your best. And I think maybe that's part of it. I don't have a whole lot of regrets around it. I wish I was better. I'm like more of a type B personality, and so I can't be very successful if I don't surround myself with some type A personalities, like some people that I can count on and they can produce. So when I have a crazy idea, they can actually sort of see it through. And I think once I realized that about myself, like I love hanging out with type Bs, but like we're not going to do anything unless you need to build a team, right?
Yeah.
And nobody teaches you in college or in school how to build a good team, how to recognize traits. Nobody teaches you how to be a good manager, how to hire and fire properly, any of that stuff. So if I do have regrets, I wish I could have learned how to be a better sort of people manager. Like I wish I'd learned earlier or recognized sooner that in the community there's fucking creepers sometimes, and ignoring them doesn't solve the problem. You have to face it. And it's, can be pretty painful and hard sometimes, but I wish sort of that Me Too moment came sooner in InfoSec,
When some of the most powerful hackers are nation state backed, like how can an average organization hope to defend itself? Like, are we destined to rely on the hyperscalers, the Amazons, the Googles?
If you're a small to medium business, I think you're doomed. There's
the quote.
You're doomed if they come after you, right? You're doomed. But there's this weird side effect of Russia is battling Ukraine on multi-tenant systems on Azure. So Microsoft is the terrain of the cyber conflict, right? It's not the hills of whatever, the Fulda Gap. It is. So then you ask yourself, well, in a fight between Microsoft and Russia on Microsoft terrain, who wins? And I think ultimately the person that controls the terrain can win, or can at least prevent the opponent from winning. And so I was talking to one of the people at Microsoft, who shall remain nameless, but I was saying, like, is my assumption correct? Am I wrong on that? How does that work? And he's like, they've got so many people that are so good all over us all the time. They just totally outnumber us, right? They just have a ton of talent. But we know and can control the environment. So if things get especially bad, we just turn the whole world upside down. We change all the routing. We can change reality for them. And that gives us 2 weeks to maybe 2 months, right? And so if things get too bad, they kind of scramble it. And like, imagine being able to do that in the physical space, right? And so small to medium business can't do that. And so I think And imagine how much Microsoft or Amazon or Google or whatever, imagine how much they've learned about defending themselves in the last couple of years because of Russian and Chinese pressure. They're light years ahead, I think, of some other companies.
Yeah, they're in the crucible. Yeah.
So it's like, I hate to say it because I hate seeing them become more central, more dominant. And then the other thing that's going on with the American government stepping back, smaller CISA, FBI is busy arresting protesters. They're not busy doing cybercrime investigations, right? Everything as America steps back, the needs of Microsoft or whoever are the same. They still need to fulfill their business objectives. But if the U.S. government is helping them less, they need to find other people who will help them more. They still need to, so they're going to reach out. They're going to participate maybe more with the Europeans. They're going to need more threat intel. They're going to build new relationships and depend less on the U.S. government. So the U.S. government will become less relevant to some of these hyperscalers, which is also a little like, I like it when the two play well together. But if it's just Microsoft or whoever is an island, like they become a little disconnected, I guess, right? Become more independent. And I was talking to a friend, the largest GPU manufacturer in the world, you can think who that is. And I said, do you think that's going to happen for you? Like, because your company needs, and if the U.S. government's not there, and he's like, yeah, absolutely right. I'm reaching out everywhere. I'm building relationships everywhere. I can't count on whatever CIS anymore. So I think that's also a change that's going on.
Okay.
It's like a.
So in that vein, if small to medium businesses are doomed, Jeff Moss, what is the biggest lie that the cybersecurity industry tells itself then?
I think there's two. One is a small to medium business can't pretend that they're a big business. They have to simplify. They can't get caught up in every trend. They have to do the basics well and outsource to others, right? And so it's sort of like these Google engineers that leave Google, and then the answer to every question is a Kubernetes cluster. And you're like, are you at Google? Do you need a Kubernetes cluster to like serve email? I don't think so. But, like it's huge hyperscaler mentality that's infecting small to medium businesses, and small to medium businesses don't need K8s everywhere. They just don't, right? But your question, which was what? Are we lies we're telling ourselves in the industry?
What is the industry? What's the biggest lie of the industry?
I think the industry likes to tell itself that it can solve the problem. And it can't solve the problem. Or else we would have solved some problems by now. Like, what problems have we solved? Did we solve modem dialing? Like war dialing? No, that still happens. Still happens, right? 40 years later. Still buffer overflows. Like there's some movements in memory safe systems languages. But generally, I think what happens is we move so quickly that we leave our problems behind. We don't solve the problem. We have new problems. And then we move on. Where, like I was saying with email, there's no solved email solution. There's no real solved yet DNS kind of security solution. There's a lot of not solved solutions. But again, is that going to make anybody $100 million or $1 billion? So I tell people, if you're in this industry, you have to think of it as you're here fighting cancer. You're not here to solve cancer. You're not going to solve cancer. If you tell yourself you're going to solve cancer, you're not going to sleep well at night, and you're going to get really frustrated in 4 or 5 years when you haven't solved cancer. But instead, if you fight cancer, you work for better patient outcomes. You work for, quality of life, longer longevity. You work for all these other totally noble and positive outcomes, but you're not solving cancer, right? And so I think in security, a lot of us think we're solving cancer, and it's not the case.
Did they ever try putting cancer on the blockchain?
There's this Web3 app. There's an NFT.
That's all right. Don't worry, AI's got this one.
Yeah.
So,
Grifter, you are absolutely right. I should have changed that chromosome.
all right. So, Good times. I have a couple. I have a bunch more questions, but I'll ask a couple, and then I want to turn it over actually to the audience, let them ask a few. But I do want to ask you one. Like, this year was the last year for SHMooCon. So with SHMooCon deciding to shut its doors rather than hand off the con, how do you decide when it's time to hand off leadership, or whether DEF CON should outlast its founder?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In the early days, meaning the first 15 years, I always figured if my planning was, if I got hit by a bus, I wanted to have whatever that final year happen and just be a big, like, farewell party for myself, right? Just throw a party, tell stories about everybody, and that would be the final sort of DEF CON. But if I don't get hit by a bus, now, as I've gotten older, I realize
better at dodging buses.
I'm better. I know what they look like.
You're doing we all did the captcha, so you could learn, this one's a bus, and Jeff is like, fantastic.
I can tell you about motorcycles and bicycles and stoplights. Yeah. And so I'm like, and it turns out watching people, it's like transition or succession is really hard, and it's actually one of the measures of a successful business. If a business can plan for succession, that's like, you see General Electric screwed that up a couple of times. Disney screwed that up a couple of times. Apple kind of screwed it up and they recovered. You know, you could argue whether Microsoft, but it's really hard. And so now DEF CON's been around so long, I wouldn't want to see it end. Where before I would probably, right? I'd just say somebody will take over the dates, somebody will continue on the same thing, they'll just call it something different. But I realized, like, I've got a freaking warehouse full of projectors, all kinds of infrastructure. And the new people taking over wouldn't have that. So you need to find a way to, like, give all the tools so the next people can have success. And the other problem is when I started DEF CON, there was no, like, nonprofit anything. Right? I think Nick Farr really started doing nonprofits for hackerspaces, and that's what really launched this idea of hackers and nonprofits. I went back.
SAINTCON.
Yeah, so I went back to look at that. Like, could I convert? Yeah. And there's this tax provision, which is basically when you convert from a for-profit to a nonprofit, at that moment you value the brand, and you pay tax on the value of the brand. So if some guy looks at the brand of DEF CON and says, oh, that's $50 million. You got to pay tax on $50 million to convert it to nonprofit. It's like, well, that would be like $25 million tax that I don't have. And now you're a nonprofit, and now I'm $25 million in the hole. Like, that doesn't sound like a very smart business maneuver, right? So I don't have some tools that nonprofits have. And now I'm kind of in this pit where I don't know if I can't get there. So I need to come up with a way, if I'm going to transition, I need to find a way to have sort of the benefits of a nonprofit without being a nonprofit. Yeah. It's something I've been thinking about. I talked about it last year a little bit with a podcast interview. I'm still thinking about it. I don't think it'll happen for years, but it would be really kind of adult of me to have considered it and planned it. And so
it's a bit of a monkey's paw type of thing, though, right? As someone who's been a DEF CON goon for this year will be 25 years, there's a lot going on in the background. If Jeff tries to give you DEF CON, run. You run. I mean, hey man, I have all these projectors. You want them? I know what this is, Jeff.
It's a trap. Yeah.
All right. Again, lots of questions, but I'm just gonna, we made fun of AI for a second, so I'm gonna ask you an AI related question. With the addition of AI into hacking and even CTFs, when do hackers stop being hackers and become prompt engineers?
This year, DEF CON, as far as we know, is the first time this happened, and now it's just going to be normal. So during DEF CON CTF, there's this portion called Live CTF, if you're familiar, but Live CTF creates these head-to-head challenges. And so as part of it, ding, 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 time for live CTFs. The team members would get randomly each team would get paired up. They'd have to have one person, one team, one person. They go up to the live CTF stage. They go head to head. There's like essentially reversing and, hacking challenges. They can't see each other, but they're going head to head. They got all their stuff set up, and there's like commentators that see the screens, and the screens are recorded and stuff. So the commentator's like, okay, he's busting out OllyDB, and he's got, Deirdre, and he's doing this. Looks like he's got a script set up searching for these kind of parameters. And they're trying to figure out, and they're watching, oh, look how quickly he's searching for the string. He must be looking for the token. And he's got like these agentic AI things, and they're running, and he's throwing code off there. Okay, now that one looks like it's doing this and that. They're going at it, and all of a sudden he wins. And he's sitting around, he's looking at this thing. The agentic AI on that one task figured it out, auto-submitted the completion, and won. And he's won, and he doesn't know it. So he's sitting there like going, man, fuck, now what am I going to do here and here? And finally the judge comes up and taps him on the shoulder. He's like, no, man, you won. No, it's good, you won. And he's like, what? And he's checking all the screens, and finally gets over there, and he's like, right on, And it was like, oh no, like that's the future, right? And how do you write CTF challenges for AI? Well, you use an AI to write a challenge for AI. Yeah. You see where this is going, right? The future of AI is now going to become, the future of CTFs will change dramatically because of AI. And this reminds me, we had a DEF CON speech, a talk with Gary Kasparov years ago, I don't know, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And he'd lost against Deep Blue chess, and it'd been a number of years, 5 or 6 years, 7 years since he'd lost. But he's telling the story about how in chess back then, the most interesting innovations going on in chess were man working with a machine. Because when it was machine-to-machine chess, the kinds of strategies they deployed, or machine against man purely, but the most sophisticated, interesting chess was happening with the best of both. And so that's where I think CTFs will end up being, right? People have craft these fantastic agentic systems to do the stuff, but it'll also sort of be the orchestrator, the human kind of doing it, because I don't think the machine has the intuition the human does. The human doesn't have the speed of the machine. And ultimately, it's going to be this hybrid synthesis that gets the best results.
All right. And then last one. So is hacker still a label that you're proud of, or is it something that you're just nostalgic for?
Yeah, it's both. I think hacking, like I said, it's a mindset. Like if I wasn't born in this generation, I didn't get lucky enough to have an IBM PC2. If it was earlier, I'm sure I would have worked on steam engines or cars. Maybe the telegraph or the phone system, right? Something where there's still that problem solving. You're at the forefront of something. It's social, but it's technical. So I think that hacker mentality transcends, right? Like some of the best hackers probably now in aerospace, like a SpaceX or a rocket startup, right? They have a lot of that same kind of energy and mentality. I think what surprised me about it is how pervasive the hacking mindset became. Like we were doing Black Hat, and I was like, well, that's it. 1,200 people. That's as many people as there are in the world that will pay this amount of money. They'll come to Vegas that care about this stuff. And then it keeps growing. And then access control people show up. And then database people show up. And then lock people show up. And then biohacking people show up. And it just keeps happening. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And lawyers show up. And then policymakers show up. And so I think it's diffused now to such a degree I never considered it would go that far. Like, no kidding, when we had Black Hat and we would track competitors to see for dates and times and scheduling, I had this guy, Carl. And when he started, he was tracking like 60 or 70 InfoSec conferences. And when we sold Black Hat to UBM and he left, he gave up tracking at over like 1,500. Now there's thousands of InfoSec conferences. And the part that always got me was, well, at some point there'll be enough. There'll be enough info, you know what I mean? We'll reach this. And then every year it grows or stays the same, but more conferences come. So it tells you there's an insatiable thirst for knowledge and to understand what's going on. And I figured that Cisco telepresence back in the day or whatever, Skype, and then Teams or whatever. I figured, and then COVID was coming, I figured, okay, we'll see if conferences can survive. And fuel gets more expensive, and air travel and hotel in Vegas gets more expensive, and every year more people would want to show up. So it tells you that telepresence stuff just doesn't cut it. People are innately human creatures, and we want to connect with humans. And that's what conferences are for. And video is a poor substitute for that. So that tells me there'll be conferences, forever. We'll have employment forever because the problems aren't going away, right? And the one thing I don't think AI can solve are certain business logic problems, right? Like how will they know, like, that CEO is out to get me? I need to position my company in this sector to prepare for that. It's like AI has no frickin' idea that the other CEO hates you because you hit on his girlfriend or whatever. Like, it can tell you all about certain things, but there's other innately human characteristics that AI is never going to, right? So that's going to be this combination. And so hacker I'm so old. I remember when they wanted to do away with the term hacker and that we're going to call it spiders. And then Tim Berners-Lee invents the web. And it's like, well, can't be a spider. And then they're like, we'll call them crackers. But coming from software piracy, it's like, no, there's like whole teams of reverse engineers that crack software. They're called crackers. They crack software protection. But the hacking people didn't really interact with the cracker people. And they kind of were two different worlds, right? So they start and that crackers are like, fuck no, like we don't want any part of that. We're over here. And then the press missed this fantastic opportunity. Instead of just calling computer criminals, they took our terminology, right? And I'm still frustrated about this because they didn't come up with a new term for criminal plumbers, right?
Yeah.
Or the guy that rips you off at the car dealership by overcharging you for the oil change or whatever. Like, they don't have a name for that. But for hackers, for some reason, they've appropriated hacker, nation state hacker. No, that's a nation state, right? And so we're never going to reclaim it because it's too entrenched, but it's one of those things where this is how we identify each other. But this identification between us, it's not for the mass media, right? It's for us as a community. And so I can still say, is he a good hacker? It's like, oh man, yeah, it's like, awesome. I don't know what else I would say. What other term would I use if I'm trying to get at like your mentality or your skill set or your mindset? I don't know. I don't have another substitute word. So maybe if we came up with another word, it would stick. But in China, speaking of China, hacker doesn't work. Hacker is like, translates to like dark visitor, which has all these negative connotations. So in China, you're not a hacker, you're a security geek. And that's the closest translation to what a hacker is in the West.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah. So, I have one question for you.
Yeah.
By show of hands, we were going to talk about like why the security industry and has some success and has some failure. But I want to see a show of hands. Who here thinks that the complexity of our networks, AI, whatever, the complexity of the systems we're going to have to protect we're kind of topped out, we're sort of maxed out in complexity, this is as much as we can handle in our brain, or do you think complexity will increase? So show of hands, complexity increase. Complexity, we're sort of like, it's as complex as about as it's going to be. Or we're going to try to simplify and make things less complex. Okay, so if things are going to be more complex, show of hands, do you ever think it will stop? Or is it more complexity forever? More complexity forever? At some point we reach a threshold and we just can't get more complex? It's fucking complexity forever. Which means more abstraction forever. Which means we're going to abstract our abstraction systems to be abstract because we can't keep it in our heads, right? The other thing with complex systems is they fail in unpredictable ways. And getting back to me saying, oh, failure is okay. Imagine you're going to have to tell your boss that the system failed and you will never know why. The system is so complicated you could burn your entire budget for the next year and you still might not understand why the system failed. So at some point, companies have to be okay to recover and keep going, because complexity means you will never get certainty on this. And like telling people that, for some people, that's an emotional, like cognitive stressor. You got ADD and you never get to know. So anyway, so I just want to put that out there. Like, you're going to have to be okay with complexity, because it's not ending ever. Right?
Yeah, wow, that what a light note to end on.
I know.
But
no pressure, no pressure.
Yeah. We have time for a couple of questions, I think. So, and we do want to get questions from the group if you got one. There's microphones out here somewhere.
Just say your name and then your question.
Yeah.
First up, thank you. I'm Sam. It's my first SAINTCON. Glad to be here. I have a quick question coming from Montreal, Canada. What's your opinion on are we going to be able to maintain sovereignty in, let's say, artificial intelligence generally? Are local models, do they have a future? Or are they going to all get swallowed by OpenAI?
I think the future is local models, because it's too expensive to train the big models.
They don't make money, so why would they have a future?
No, they absolutely do make money, but they make money in like really tight verticals. So I've talked to people in healthcare looking at very specific health problems, and they're only buying certified systems that meet certain requirements, false positives, not these general ChatGPT type systems, right? They're using very specific industrial. So can you imagine you're Boeing and you feed it every engineering document you have, every safety report, every whatever, a materials science, everything. And the engineer is like, hey, what kind of hinge should work best in this application? And it can tell you like the history of hinges in aircraft doors or whatever. That's fantastic, right? But it's not useful to anybody but Boeing. And so I think the future is going to be helping all these different verticals, because it's within their power to probably train, and it doesn't cost $1 billion in 6 months.
And our small businesses going to be able to get on
one
that?
question, Sal.
Thank you very much.
So greedy. He said he was from Canada, but he didn't say I'm sorry. That is a plant.
Okay, next question.
Hello, name's Devin. My question is on DEF CON and the attendance. Do you ever see, with the growth that you've been talking about, do you ever see it'll come a point where you have to cap the attendance of DEF CON?
It's, we've gone backwards. Last year we were about 5% smaller, and I'm betting with the economy next year we'll shrink again, just because the economy. And but those were one of, like, we talked about giving away the content for free because I was sort of lazy. It was the same thing with attendance. Because I wasn't allowed, or I didn't get invites in the early days, I didn't want to ever have that happen to someone else, so it was open. So the problem with being open is you don't know how many people are going to show up. But I also don't have to say no. And I was always concerned that, like, if I capped attendance, people would write, well, now they write botnets to try to register in time, and tickets sell out in 0.2 milliseconds or whatever. And it's like, well, I want the lazy fuckers to show up too. I want the people who sleep in and are thinking about stuff. And so I didn't want to reward just the people hovering over the keyboard on the submit button. And so because of that, right, that's a fork in the road, open or closed, free content, not free. There's certain forks in the road, and we've sort of picked our poison. And so I don't see why or how I would ever cap attendance, because well, then who do I exclude? And I don't want to have to be making those decisions.
Thank you.
I think, is there anybody over there? Or there's just a little cluster of curious people over here. That guy right here.
Earlier, my name's Josh, by the way. I am a government sysadmin. Earlier, you had said that Azure or Microsoft controls the landscape of that battlefield, right? About 4 or 5 years ago, there's been a big push to move government systems, at least a lot of the ones I work with, into these hyperscaling environments. And it's always kind of occurred to me that how does the government remain in its regulatory role while regulating possibly these companies that control the landscape of all their IT infrastructure, and where does that go and lead us?
I think the underlining the question is sort of what I think is software. There's no software liability right now. And that's because the argument is always like, we're moving so fast, or we're creating so many jobs. If you slow us down, it's so competitive. Do you really want to be the person that hurts innovation? And so we don't have liability in software. And that's the same argument of like why we need to copy all the copywritten works of the world for AI, right? Don't slow us down. We have to move fast. And I think government at some point, they have to have a role in regulating, or at least determining outcomes, like what's permissible behavior. So if they took on this copyright issue and really puzzled it out, great, they'd be doing their job. But just punting doesn't feel like government's really fulfilling their mandate. And just like people say, well, it's software liability all or nothing. And it's like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. If you're an open source project and you give away your source code, no liability for you, right? But if you're closed source and it's a commercial product and you discontinue it, maybe there's some liability. But if you open source the discontinued product, no liability. You could cap liability. It could be $10,000. It could be $1 million. There's endless possibilities around liability where you don't have to do all or nothing. But there's this, people just are afraid of even dipping their toe in that water. And I think you'll know that things are changing when people start dipping their toe in that water. And you see this in Europe with the CRA's Cyber Resiliency Act. They're going to start imposing some software liability next year, I think. We'll see how that goes, right? But at least their government is pursuing something.
All right. We are out of time, but thank you, Jeff, for coming. Thank you for being here at SAINTCON.
Thanks, Jeff Moss. Hacker. Hacker. Right on, man. That worked well.